This week, I want to share a post-production technique that I use to create a paper script of my documentary film before I create a visual edit in Premiere Pro. This technique will help you take the many hours of interviews that you filmed. It'll help you organize them, boil them down to their most essential moments. And if you learn this strategy, your edit will feel way less daunting and you'll save yourself a ton of time in the process. Hey everyone, if you're new here, my name is Austin Meyer. I'm a documentary filmmaker, National Geographic Explorer, and on this channel, I share the field-tested skills, mindsets, and lessons that have helped me on my journey as a documentary filmmaker. So today we're talking about a paper script, or what some people call a paper cut. Why are paper scripts useful in a non-scripted storytelling form? Well, that's because paper scripts let you quickly put together a coherent story from hours of material before moving into an editing software to put the visuals together. And with platforms like Google Docs, creating a paper script is also much easier for collaboration. Everyone can review, comment, and give feedback on a paper script early in the process. That way, by the time you start the challenging and time-consuming process of putting together the visual cut, everyone is on the same page of where you're going. I've used the technique that I'm going to walk you through today on documentary and commercial projects. I used it when I worked for Insider's news and documentary team, where paper scripting was a huge part of how we covered breaking news and longer form human interest stories across the world. And I've used it on commercial projects as well. Today I'm going to show you this method through the case study of a story I directed, filmed, and edited for a brand called Polar USA. Polar creates fitness wearables like sport watches and heart rate monitors for athletes. And on this project, I got called in to direct a branded documentary story that featured their sponsored athlete, Taylor Rapp. At the time, Taylor played safety in the NFL for the Los Angeles Rams. And for all the football fans out there, today he now plays for the Buffalo Bills. This shoot took place over the course of 4 days in Bellingham, Washington, and included 6 interviews, after which I was tasked with bringing everything together for a story in the range of 7 to 10 minutes. So, got my computer here. Let's jump into my technique for creating a paper edit, a technique which I call clustering. Okay, so the first thing I did when I got back from Bellingham, Washington, as I was moving into the paper script direction, is I created just a folder system here in Google Drive, which I use, and I created these kind of like 6 buckets, which are my process for creating a paper script, going one step at a time. The first thing I did was create a story outline. So the story outline is essentially my just initial impression of what the story is, jumping off from the shoot. So like, what did I feel out there? What did I see out there? And usually this is something that I've already started to craft before I get on location. So with this particular outline, I had done a pre-interview with the main subject of the story, Taylor. And so I actually had this outline already written up before I went on location, because this was one that we needed to be really efficient shooting because we didn't have much time. So I kind of put together. Now, when I returned home from the shoot, then I look back at this outline and say, okay, you know what? I actually didn't really get that part of the story that I thought I was going to get. Ooh, but I did get this. So like, okay, this Bruce Lee thing we actually didn't really talk about that, even though he talked about it in the pre-interview. So I start to kind of look at this initial outline and just kind of mess with it a little bit based on what happened during the shoot. Now, the reason I do this outline is so that I have some direction as I start to get into making my paper script and looking through all my interviews. Because the second part of the process is to compile transcriptions from all the interviews you've done. So I've been on documentary projects where we're doing hundreds of interviews. This one only had 6, but the practice and the technique is still the same. So when I do my transcriptions, there are a couple of different services that I've used over the years, and transcription services are really a space where technology is getting better and better so fast. And so I'm sure you have tried this before. Use whatever you're comfortable with. When I have been working at news agencies, and even for this piece right here, I used a service for transcriptions called Temi. Temi, Temi.com, and a lot of different editorial outlets we use Temi. It is 25 cents per minute, and it gives you just, a very basic transcription file from either audio or video. And so you can see here.
For over 11 years. That was when he was in 8th grade.
So I do my transcriptions. I never am taking the time to actually type out everything that's being said. That is just not time well spent. So once I went into Temi, I then downloaded the transcription and then brought them over into my transcriptions compiled. Now this is like, I have all the interviews that I did from this one particular production in the same Google Doc. So I have the Taylor Rapp, I have his brother named Austin, his coach who he's working on a rehab for an injury on. So I compile all the interviews into just one document because I didn't have too many on this project. So it's easy to have all in one document. I will also note that a lot of people for transcriptions do like to use a service called Descript. Descript, like most transcription services nowadays, will let you kind of have the video here in one window while also having the transcription on the left.
The Raiders left and the Warriors, right after the championship, they were gone. We were kind of left a bit empty.
Same kind of function, just for this one I use Temi. And if you don't want to pay for a service, actually now right in Premiere Pro, you can use the text tab to create a transcription of your interview. So there really is no reason to take a bunch of time or spend a bunch of money getting a nice transcription. So back into my transcription is compiled. Once I have that, I then just duplicate that file, transcriptions compiled, and create transcription compiled highlighted. Now, these are where I read through all of the interviews, and based on the themes that I have a sense that I want to track in this particular story, or based on the outline that I previously wrote that I showed, I start to highlight quotes that I like, highlight quotes that stand out, that are potentially powerful. And at this stage of the process, especially in all of both the outline and the initial kind of like highlighting of transcriptions, I'm never too precious about what I am writing down or what I'm highlighting. This is all we're all prototyping. We're just getting ideas out there. We have to kind of cast a wide net, and then slowly as the editing process goes, we start to narrow into what our story actually is. What are the actual tight quotes that we can make a story from? So while I am highlighting the transcriptions, I will use different colors based on the speaker. So this is Taylor Rapp's interview, and I'm going through, I'm highlighting quotes, and then you'll see when I get to his brother, I switch the color. So yellow to green and to blue to red. So I switch the colors, and that is because the next stage, after I've transcribed all my interviews, after I've highlighted quotes that I think are powerful, that speak to a theme, that speak to the story that I want to tell, then I create a document called Interview Selects. So Interview Selects is where I then have deleted all the text that has not been highlighted in that compiled transcription document. So I have all of Taylor's highlights, all of his brother Austin's highlights, his coach, his mom, his girlfriend, and his dad. So as I'm in my editing software at any point in the process, I can always revisit all of these quotes that stood out to me on a first read. And that's why when I'm initially highlighting Interview Selects, I'm not too choosy, because I don't know exactly where my story is gonna go. I don't know how it's gonna play out in the editing software, so I don't wanna cut things that could be great. So I kind of, again, cast a wide net early, and then as I go, narrow in. So once I have all my interview select quotes, then I go to the step which I call clustering. I start to look at all of these highlighted quotes I have, and I start to take them and put them into different clusters, different themes. So here are some of the clusters that I had for this particular project. I wanted things about mindset. This story was about Taylor Rapp, this NFL player. What made him unique? What was his mindset that allowed him to be one of the very few athletes in the world that can make it to the What are ideas around mindset? what are quotes about his parents' influence? I knew that in my outline, my story outline, in kind of this B block right here after the hook, I wanted to have him talking about, his childhood, how his parents raised him. So I have a parent's influence. I have a childhood block. We have obstacles. I knew I wanted to have that obstacles there, which was kind of this C block here, kind of like I have, great parenting, but I faced all these obstacles before coming out and being a role model and being successful. So we have obstacles, and then we have overcoming obstacles. We have his love story with his girlfriend, and then kind of like where I wanted to end the piece, which is about being a role model, setting a new precedent. And so for that, I had, making an impact on others. So I set my clusters based on the outline, based on the themes that I know are present in the story. And then I start taking quotes from this document where I have my selects, and I start to try to fit them into different clusters. And this is where having the highlighted different colors is very useful, because I can see just at a glance, okay, when we're thinking about childhood, okay, these are Taylor quotes, these are his brother quotes, these are his mom's quotes, these are his dad's. So I can kind of get a sense of like who was talking the most about what, and where to then find them once I move into the editing software later. Some quotes won't fit into one of the initial clusters that I had thought about at the outset. And so as I go, I will add additional clusters if I'm seeing, I really liked, when I was reading through the interviews, I really liked all these quotes about this thing that's not really represented right now in my cluster. So I'm going to add a new cluster. And that's so I can just get a sense of what I have. And then once I have my clusters, this makes it much easier and just much more approachable to start to create that paper script or that flow using actual quotes from the participants that I interviewed and putting it into, a more specific outline that will then put me going in the right direction as I move into the editing software. So here's how I took the selects that were clustered and then moved into my script. So you can see here, some of this now has gone away from my initial story outline, but some of it is actually like right on point. So in my story outline before, I got into this, I said A block, I want a fast paced opener, I want hook shots, I want motivational quotes, that kind of thing. Okay, well, here we go.
Hard work always pays off.
6, 7.
You might not be the most talented player or individual or athlete, but if you want something bad enough, you'll find a way to make it happen.
It was school, football, sleep. That's all he did, all 4 years.
He's like a very quiet person, but then on the football field, he's two totally different people.
We always say you have to be prepared. So once that opportunity comes, you grab it, won't let it go.
He has this mindset of being like on a one-way train. He has his vision and his end goal. Nothing's gonna get in the way of that.
And this clustering and then paper script technique on this particular piece worked really well because I didn't have, in the 4 days I was filming, I didn't have a ton of like scenes to lean on in the piece. I really needed this to be an interview-led piece with only, 4 days to film. And I thought it would be really neat to kind of have each of the interview participants kind of commenting on Taylor in an intertwined way. That's why I kind of like to see the different colors next to each other. So we have here, when we're talking about the obstacles that he overcame in his small town to, become one of the first professional football players ever from there. We start with his quote, we start with his coach saying this, And then we move into Taylor saying this, and we move into his dad saying this. So having each character kind of building on top of what the other person said creates this kind of compelling and honest depiction of what it was like for Taylor to get to the NFL. And so I like the kind of colored version of how this paper script played out, because it allowed me to see who's well represented in the story from a just like time on screen perspective, and where do I not have many quotes that I might want to stray away from. So this was such a helpful technique in this particular piece. Now, I think when we talk about paper scripts, one of the things that's really important to remember is that this is just a starting point. There are so many amazing nuances about what we capture on video that cannot be illustrated or captured in a paper script like this. We can't tell just by the text on screen here how someone said something, what their intonation was. Did they cough in the middle of that sentence and it kind of distorted all the audio of that sentence? We can't tell. But a paper script like this is a great starting point for how to move into Premiere Pro or whatever video editing software you use and just have a start. Because so much of the video editing process is just to like get started, don't worry about perfection, and kind of lower the bar to the next step of just taking some sort of action, of starting to put something down on that timeline. We want to make the barrier to that blank timeline or that blank page just as low as possible so that we can just get started. So I can go over the process of bringing this into the editing software. If that's something you want to see, just let me know in the comments. But essentially what I'll do is I'll get these quotes from those interviews and then start to build on my timeline, kind of like what I call the A-roll track. So kind of start to put these quotes down on the timeline and then match visuals to them. So there you have it. That is the technique of clustering in order to create a paper script. Again, I've used this in so many contexts, and it's a really useful way to gain some momentum as you move into the post-production process in your editing software, because it's hard to move things around and get everything organized if you're just existing in that little timeline on the Premiere Pro or whatever you use editing software. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you do, let me know in the comments. Is this a technique that you use? Do you do something different when you're making paper scripts? And let me know also what else you're curious to hear me talk about, share about. I'd love for this to be a dialogue with those of you who are watching, and make sure that I'm offering the most value possible based on where you are in your trajectory, what challenges you're working through as a documentary filmmaker. So just let me know. Thanks so much for watching. Until next week, go out and tell some stories.